Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? That was the first question that would come back to Valerie Harrington months later, when the headlines called her everything from hero to liability. Why was everyone pretending not to see the woman who'd once made the longest confirmed kill shot in Army Ranger history? Maybe because it was easier to look away than to remember what she'd done to earn it. That morning the world was quiet. Montana quiet, the kind where wind moved through tall grass and made a sound like breathing. Valerie stood in her mother's backyard, hammer in hand, replacing old fence posts one by one. Every strike was measured, deliberate, mechanical. You could almost see her thoughts trying to escape through motion. "Little N, you're going to burn yourself out before dinner," her mother called from the porch. Valerie didn't answer, she just kept hammering. Her mother, Phyllis, sat there with her iced tea, silver hair pulled back, voice soft but sharp. "You can't work your way out of thinking, honey." Valerie just muttered, "I'm not thinking." But she was. Every swing of the hammer was a memory. Every nail driven into dry wood was a ghost she couldn't bury. Afghanistan still lived behind her eyes, that one ridge, that one shot, that one family she hadn't known was in the line of fire. She hadn't touched a rifle since the day she'd left the army. Disgraced, decorated, broken, all at once. Now she just rebuilt fences and pretended it was therapy. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Once, twice. She ignored it. Probably another reminder from Dr. Holland's office, the therapist who kept calling about trauma integration. Valerie didn't believe in integration. You either lived with what you did or it ate you alive. The phone buzzed again, then again. She finally pulled it out, 3 messages. All from Vernon Craig, Vietnam vet, hardware store owner, one of the few men in Boulder Creek who still looked her in the eye. "Turn on the radio. High school hostage situation. They're asking for you." She stared at the screen. Her pulse stayed steady, the way it always did when the world started falling apart. She didn't panic, didn't speak, just let the weight of those words sink in. "They're asking for you." She walked to her old truck and turned the key. The local news station crackled through static. "All units, active situation at Boulder Creek High School. Multiple hostages confirmed. Armed suspects barricaded in the gymnasium. County Tactical Team ETA, 4 hours." 4 hours. Valerie's jaw clenched. 4 hours was a lifetime in a live situation. 4 hours meant escalation. Someone making a desperate choice. Someone dying because backup was too far away. She turned off the radio, sat there in silence, gripping the steering wheel. This wasn't her problem. She wasn't law enforcement, wasn't even military anymore. She was just Valerie Harrington, the washed-up ranger who'd come home to her mother's house and a town that didn't want her around. She'd been told, politely, that her presence made people uncomfortable, that maybe Boulder Creek needed time to heal. But now they were asking for her. Inside, Phyllis stood by the kitchen window, face pale as she listened to the same radio report. "You heard?" she asked when Valerie walked in. "I heard." "What are you going to do?" Valerie leaned against the counter. Her rebuilt knee ached, her scarred leg stiff from old pain. "Nothing. It's not my place." "Vernon said they asked for you." "Vernon doesn't know what he's talking about." "Sheriff Chambers does." Valerie's eyes hardened. "The same man who told me to leave town, who said my reputation made people uneasy. Now he wants a favor." Phyllis stepped closer. "There are children in that school, Valerie, kids like the ones I taught, kids like Brett Anderson, the one who mows our lawn, like Madison Shepard, whose father, I'm guessing, is one of those men with a gun." "Don't," Valerie said quietly. "Don't what?" "Don't remind me that I could help." Her mother's voice softened. "You're the only person within 200 miles who can do this. You don't know who I am anymore." "I do," Phyllis said, eyes full of tears she refused to shed. You're the girl who joined the army to prove women belonged. The ranger who took the longest shot in history because no one else could. You're scared, honey. I'm not scared. You're terrified of failing again, of proving them right. The words hit harder than any hammer. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Valerie pulled out her phone, scrolled to Sheriff Chambers' number and stared at it. If I go, she said, they'll call it grandstanding. Redemption porn, they'll say I'm trying to prove something. Phillies whispered, and if you don't go, children die. Valerie pressed the call button. It rang twice. Harrington, a voice said, gravelly, tired. Sheriff Marvin Chambers. I'm listening, she said. Thank God, he breathed. We've got Franklin Shepard and his boy Wyatt locked in the gym. 14 hostages. Mayor Hutchkins, 2 teachers, some locals. It's bad, Val. County Tactical's 4 hours out. FBI's on the way, but... 4 hours, she finished. That's too long. Yeah, Shepard's already fired warning shots. The kid's nervous. Real nervous. This could go bad fast. What do you want from me, Sheriff? I'm asking if you'll help. Not officially, just help. You told me to leave town last month. I know, and I was wrong, but right now you're the only shot we've got. She looked at her mother. Phyllis nodded once, tears in her eyes. I'll be there in 15 minutes, Valerie said. But Sheriff, when this is over, we're going to talk about what I'm owed. Fair enough. She hung up, walked to the hall closet, moved past the coats and boxes and pulled out a locked black case, the kind built to survive war zones. Her mother stood in the doorway, voice trembling but strong. Bring them home, Valerie, all of them. Valerie nodded once, then stepped into the light, Montana sun suddenly cold against her skin. By the time she reached Boulder Creek High School, it looked less like a school and more like a front line. Sheriff's vehicles formed a rough perimeter. Deputies crouched behind open doors. State police arrived from 3 counties over. News vans gathered like vultures, cameras feeding chaos to the world. Sheriff Chambers stood near a command truck, talking into a radio. His uniform was damp with sweat. When Valerie's pickup rolled in, he stopped mid-sentence. Watched her step out, that same deliberate calm she'd always carried. No uniform, no armor, just jeans, boots, a faded Ranger t-shirt, and the case in her hands. Harrington, he said when she reached him. Sheriff. They stood there for a heartbeat, a veteran and a man who'd once asked her to leave. Situation's bad, he said. Franklin's got the gym sealed. No phone, no clear demands. He keeps shouting about the bank, foreclosures, the town council, his son, with him, armed, the kids unstable. How many shots fired? 3 into the ceiling so far. She set the case down, opened it. Inside, a Barrett M82.50 caliber rifle, a weapon of impossible precision. She lifted it with the ease of old muscle memory, checked the chamber, the optics, the barrel alignment. Building's old, Chambers continued. Cinder block walls, you breach wrong, it collapses. Then don't breach, she said. Where's my vantage? He pointed to a ridgeline northeast of the school. 3,000 meters, clear line of sight through the east windows. I'll need a spotter. Deputy Brooks, he said. Former Army, sharp eyes, she volunteered. Valerie nodded toward the young deputy walking up, steady, confident. Don't believe everything you've heard, Valerie said as they shook hands. I don't, Brooks replied. That's why I'm here. They reviewed building plans on the hood of a cruiser. Valerie traced her finger across the map, 3 windows, reinforced but not bulletproof. 1 clear angle through window 2. Wind, west, 8 miles per hour. Distance, 3,040 meters. Margin of error, a life. I'll be clear, Sheriff, Valerie said. I'm not firing unless absolutely necessary. This isn't Afghanistan. These are our neighbors. I'm not asking you to. Yes, you are, she said quietly. You're asking for a failsafe, so when this goes wrong, you can point to me and say you had no choice. He didn't argue, just nodded once. "Get in position, keep me updated." Valerie packed the rifle, climbed into her truck. Brooks followed with the spotting scope and radio. As they drove east, Boulder Creek faded behind them, a town that had tried to erase her, now depending on her aim to survive the day. "I didn't come for them," she said finally, eyes fixed on the ridge ahead. "I came because there are kids in there who don't deserve to die for grown men's mistakes." Brooks didn't answer. She didn't need to. 20 minutes later they reached the overlook. Flat stone, scrub pine, cold wind biting through the air. Valerie unpacked the Barrett, assembled it in silence, each motion like prayer. Brooks adjusted the scope. 3,040 meters, wind 7 west-northwest, temp 62 and dropping. Valerie lay prone, pressed her eye to the scope. Through glass and distance, the world narrowed. One school, one gym, one life about to change everything. 3 windows, she whispered. 2 show movement, one's blocked by bleachers. "Can you see hostages?" "Not clearly, just silhouettes." She focused on 2 figures, one older, one younger. The older moved like a man carrying too much history. The younger trembled with every shift of light. "That's them," she murmured, "Franklin and Wyatt Shepard." And as dusk began to fall across Boulder Creek, Captain Valerie Harrington, the woman they'd told to stay home, to move on, to disappear, steadied her breath, adjusted her sights, and prepared to do the thing she swore she'd never do again. Wait for the world to need her trigger finger. What if the first shot hadn't been a warning? That was the question that lived under every heartbeat as dusk bled into night over Boulder Creek High School. Inside the gym, the echo of Franklin Shepard's last blast still hung in the air like a memory that wouldn't leave. The acrid sting of burned powder floated above frightened whispers. 14 hostages huddled together, their breathing a single trembling rhythm. Franklin paced near the bleachers, the shotgun never steady in his hands. 63 years old, his face carved by decades of sun and failure, and now by something heavier, regret pretending to be anger. Wyatt, his son, stood near the entrance with a hunting rifle he clearly didn't want to hold. 19, barely a man, already drowning in the consequences of another man's desperation. "Dad," Wyatt whispered, "maybe we should." "Should what?" Franklin snapped. "Let them pretend this is fine. Let them build condos on our graves." He kept packing, muttering to ghosts. Across the room, Principal Patricia Warner tried to keep the students calm. Her voice was even, but her hands trembled as she counted faces. Brett Anderson, Emma Wright, Tyler Knox, children she'd once sent to detention now sitting inches from death. "Everyone stay down," she whispered. "Stay quiet." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, half burnt out. Somewhere in the distance, a police loudspeaker called Franklin's name, patient, careful. He ignored it. Outside, officers crouched behind vehicles, radios hissing with coded chatter. The news cameras had multiplied. The world was watching a rancher's breakdown, but nobody understood what it meant to lose everything you built, to have a town nod politely while you drowned. And on the ridge 3 kilometers away, Valerie Harrington watched it all through glass. The scope turned the scene into a painting of movement and shadow. Her world had narrowed to crosshairs, wind, and the soft pulse in her trigger finger. "Movement," Deputy Brooks whispered beside her. "Southwest corner, looks like Wyatt packing." "Confirmed," Valerie said. "He's nervous, fingers too close to the trigger." "He's going to make a mistake." "Soon," Valerie murmured. "Maybe an hour." She adjusted her scope, fine-tuning elevation for wind shear. Her body had already numbed to the rock beneath her. Pain was information. She'd learned to let it exist without permission. "Overwatch, this is command," Sheriff Chambers' voice crackled through static. "FBI convoy 5 minutes out. Agent Russell Grant leading. You know him." Valerie's jaw tightened. "We've met." "That going to be a problem?" "Only if he makes it one." She could already imagine him. Pressed suit, perfect hair, all protocol and liability talk. The kind of man who never smelled gunpowder but always had an opinion about it. Brooks smirked faintly. You don't like suits. I don't like people who think paperwork can stop a bullet. Below them, headlights carved the night. A black SUV rolled to a stop near the command truck. Out stepped Grant exactly as she remembered. Calm, polished, dangerous in a bureaucratic way. He shook Chambers' hand like he was taking ownership of the entire town. Here comes the part where he tells everyone to stand down, Valerie muttered. Brooks laughed quietly. You really think he'll try to pull you off this ridge? He'll try, Valerie said. And if he does, he'll learn how heavy authority feels when you're 3,000 meters away from reality. She went back to her scope. Franklin Shepard's silhouette drifted across the gym like a storm cloud. She watched him stop, shoulders sagging under invisible weight. His son turned toward him, saying something she couldn't hear. Through the scope, their body language told the story. The boy pleading, the father unraveling. Overwatch, Chambers called again. FBI is taking command. Expect direct contact. Copy, Valerie said flatly. Her phone buzzed seconds later. She didn't answer. It buzzed again. She let it go to voicemail. Third time, she sighed and answered. Harrington. Captain Harrington, came the crisp voice. This is Agent Grant. I know who it is. Then you know this setup is highly irregular. So is a hostage situation in a town with one stoplight. I need you to vacate that position immediately. Not happening. Captain, this isn't the Middle East. You don't have jurisdiction here. And you don't have range. County Tactical's 4 hours away. You want a better shot, find one. This is about liability, he insisted. If something goes wrong, she interrupted, it's on me. Not you, not the Bureau, me. Grant went silent long enough for Valerie to hear the rain beginning to whisper against the pine. Fine, he said finally. You stay put, but you take no shot without my order, clear. Crystal. And Harrington, he added, voice colder now. If you compromise this operation, I'll bury you in federal charges. Understood, she said, and ended the call. Brooks chuckled under her breath. That went well. He'll calm down, Valerie said. He's a professional on paper. She refocused through her scope. The scene inside the gym had shifted. Franklin was talking again, louder now, gesturing wildly at Mayor Hutchkins. You promised us help, he shouted. You said you fight for ranchers, you lied. The mayor's voice came faint, shaking. Franklin, please, I tried. You tried nothing. Franklin's words cracked under grief. You drank my coffee, shook my hand, and signed the papers that took my life. His voice broke completely. For a heartbeat, he looked less like a villain and more like a man asking why the world forgot him. Inside the gym, the students flinched. Brett pulled Emma away from the line of sight, whispering, "Stay down." Emma's phone glowed uselessly. No signal, no escape. Overwatch, Brooks whispered. He's losing control. I see it. Valerie tracked Franklin's movement, every packing step aligning with the slow rise and fall of her breath. She hadn't felt this focus since Kabul, since the shot that had ended a life and her career in the same breath. She tried to keep the memory buried, but combat memories had a way of sneaking through cracks in the armor. Want to tell me what really happened over there? Brooks asked softly. No. Fair enough. Silence stretched between them, the kind that only existed between soldiers who understood waiting. Finally, Valerie spoke, voice low. They said it was a clean mission, high-value target, but intel was wrong. There was a child. I pulled the trigger anyway. Brooks didn't respond. She didn't have to. The army cleared me, Valerie said. But clearance doesn't clean your soul, so I came home, thought maybe I'd find peace. Turns out peace doesn't like me much either. The wind shifted. She adjusted 2 clicks left. Below, Agent Grant began deploying FBI negotiators. A female voice soon replaced the loudspeaker. Calm, steady, professional. Franklin Shepard, this is Agent Sarah Phelps with the FBI. I'd like to talk. Franklin stopped packing, looked toward the sound. I know you're angry, Phelps continued. I know you feel unheard. I'm listening now. Help me understand what you need. Franklin laughed, a hollow sound that echoed through the gym. What I need my ranch back. I can't promise that, she said gently, but I can promise to work on a solution with you. Let's start by showing good faith. Let some people go. Good faith, Franklin muttered. Where was that when the bank foreclosed? I hear you, she said. You were wronged, but you can still make this right. Long pause. Then to everyone's surprise, he nodded. All right, he called. The kids, they can go. Through her scope, Valerie watched the gym door crack open. First came Tyler Knox, the linebacker, shaking like a leaf. Then Emma Wright, sprinting into the daylight, sobbing. Then Brett Anderson last, looking back once before officers pulled him to safety. 3 kids free, 11 still inside. The radio filled with cautious optimism, cheers half suppressed. Valerie let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Progress, she murmured. Brooks smiled. Maybe this ends clean. Maybe, Valerie said, but maybe is a dangerous word. Night came like a closing fist. The temperature dropped, rain threatened, the ridge grew colder, lonelier. Valerie switched to thermal scope. Heat signatures glowed red and orange in the gym. Hostages clustered together, Franklin packing, Wyatt near the door. Still awake, she whispered, hasn't rested in hours. Neither have you, Brooks replied. I'm fine. You always say that. Because it's always true until it is. Below, the FBI camp pulsed with artificial light. Generators hummed. Reporters whispered rehearsed empathy. The world loved a tragedy it could watch from a safe distance. Overwatch, this is Grant, the radio crackled. We're pulling tactical back. We'll run through the night. Let him tire himself out. Negative, Valerie said instantly. You give him time, you give him desperation. Morning comes and he realizes he's trapped. That's when executions start. That's not your call, Captain. It should be. Maintain position. No further contact unless situation changes. The radio clicked dead. Brooks exhaled sharply. He's making a mistake. I know. So what do we do? Valerie adjusted her scope. We wait, we watch, and when he breaks, we move before the bureaucracy does. They settled into silence, the kind that only people with discipline could survive. Hours passed. The gym's heat signatures shifted as people lay down, exhausted. Wyatt stayed near the door, his packing slower now, the rhythm of a mind unraveling. At 2 a.m., Valerie's phone buzzed. A single text from an old contact, heard you're on Overwatch, stay sharp. No name, just someone who still believed she was worth believing in. She set the phone down, returned to her scope. In that stillness, her thoughts drifted back to Afghanistan again, to the ridge at Kabul, to the shot she'd taken, to the child who'd stood over the body she'd made. Some nights she still saw his face through the scope, not accusation, just confusion, as if he couldn't understand why the world had chosen that moment to collapse. The long dark, that's what snipers called this part, the endless stretch between decision and action, the place where time dissolved and you found out who you really were. And as the rain began to fall in thin, steady sheets over Boulder Creek, Captain Valerie Harrington lay prone on cold stone, a town's fragile hope balanced against her trigger finger, waiting for dawn and whatever came with it. What does the world sound like right before it falls apart? For Captain Valerie Harrington, it sounded like rain hitting stone, slow, persistent, cleansing nothing. She had been prone on the ridgeline for 16 hours. Her elbows had long stopped hurting. Pain had turned into data, discomfort into discipline. Below, Boulder Creek lay drowned in mist. The high school was a red brick island in a gray sea. The parking lot shimmered with puddles, the command post glowing like a floating city under floodlights. "Movement inside," Deputy Brooks whispered, voice raw from the long night. "Where?" "West Wall," Shepard seniors still seated, kids packing. Valerie adjusted the thermal scope. The shapes glowed faintly, one small, one broad, one trembling harder every minute. "Wyatt hasn't slept," she murmured. 24 hours awake. Fear keeps you awake longer than caffeine. Brooks shifted her numb legs. "How long can you keep this up?" "As long as it takes." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I've got." The radio hissed alive. "Overwatch, this is command," Agent Grant's clipped voice said. "Status check." "Hostiles still stationary," Valerie replied. "No sign of immediate escalation." "Copy. New negotiator rotating in at 700. Recommend pushing real concessions," she added. "The kid's cracking." "Your recommendation is noted." Static swallowed him again. She exhaled through her nose slow. Grant's world ran on memos, hers ran on minutes. Rain thickened, drumming against the rifle barrel. Water beaded and rolled off the suppressor, blurring her reflection in the metal. She pulled the hood of her poncho lower and breathed the smell of wet pine. Below, Franklin Shepard's world had shrunk to the gym's four walls. He sat against the cinder block, shotgun laid across his knees, staring at nothing. His son's footsteps were the only sound. Back and forth. Back and forth. A metronome for regret. "Dad, we should end this." Wyatt's voice was paper-thin. Franklin didn't answer. "Mom's probably outside. She's scared." Still nothing. "Dad." I said quiet. The echo stung more than the words. Wyatt flinched and turned away, staring at the row of silent hostages. Teachers, neighbors, people who used to smile at him in church. He felt their eyes now, judging, pitying, afraid. How did we get here, he thought. A question with too many answers. Outside the gym, the negotiator's voice came through the megaphone again. Calm, female, different from last night. "Franklin, this is Agent Phelps. You and I spoke yesterday. Can we keep talking?" Franklin rubbed his temples. The voice was soft, professional, relentless. "You keep talking, nobody listens." "I am listening," she said. "So is your wife. Catherine's here, Franklin." The shotgun twitched in his grip. "What?" "She's at the perimeter. She wants to talk to you." He hesitated, breathing quick. "Then put her on." They patched the phone line through. "Franklin." Her voice hit him like a hammer wrapped in silk. "Kate." "Oh, thank God. Are you all right?" "I don't know anymore." "Then come home." "I can't." "You can." He looked around the gym, the tired faces, the trembling kids, the ruin he'd made. "I already crossed the line." "Then cross back," she whispered, "please." On the ridgeline, Valerie listened through the feed. Every word transmitted through command, echoing softly in her earpiece. She watched the heat signatures. Franklin's smaller, fainter, slumping forward. Wyatt's packing slowed to a crawl. Brooks whispered, "Think she can reach him?" "Maybe." "Maybe again." "Yeah." The line crackled. "Franklin," Catherine said, voice breaking. "You still have us, me, Wyatt, Madison. That's worth more than land." He stared at the shotgun. "That land was us. It was dirt. We made it a home. We can make another." "I don't know how." "One step at a time." Valerie closed her eyes. The words felt heavier than they should. One step at a time. The same thing her therapist had said. The same thing she'd ignored. "Overwatch, situations shifting," she reported softly. "Subject showing signs of collapse, emotional fatigue, potential surrender." "Copy," Chambers answered. "Hold your shot." "Never planned otherwise." But she kept her eye on Franklin. His hands were shaking now. Rain streaked the gym windows, warping the thermal shapes. "Wyatt," Franklin whispered. "Yeah, Dad. I'm tired. I know. Whatever happens, walk away. From you. From all of it." Seconds stretched. Then Wyatt slowly set the rifle down on the floor. "I'm walking out," he said. Franklin looked up, eyes wet. "Son, I love you, but I can't do this anymore." He moved toward the doors. Franklin didn't stop him. The door opened. Cold air rushed in. Outside, agents screamed commands. "Hands up, hands up." Through her scope, Valerie watched Wyatt step into the rain, arms raised, shaking uncontrollably. Deputies pulled him down, disarmed him, dragged him to safety. Inside, Franklin stood alone. The most dangerous thing in a standoff wasn't the man with a gun. It was the man who just lost the reason not to use it. "He's alone now," Brooks whispered. "I see it. That makes him unpredictable. That makes him human." "Overwatch, stand by," Grant's voice crackled. "We may have a window, tacticals prepping breach." "Negative," Valerie said instantly. "You move now, he'll start shooting. We can't risk him fortifying." "He's not fortifying, he's falling apart." "Captain, that's not your call." "It is from up here," she snapped. "You breach that gym and you'll be zipping up body bags." Silence, then grudging. "You have 1 hour, then we move." Brooks muttered, "He's giving you rope. Maybe he thinks I'll hang myself with it." Valerie's eyes never left the scope. She watched Franklin sink to the floor, the shotgun hanging loose between his knees. Rain kept hammering the roof. Thunder rolled across the valley like artillery. She should have felt relief that the boy was safe. But all she felt was the echo of a memory, a mother running into gunfire, a child screaming in a language she couldn't forget. She whispered to herself, "Not again." Brooks looked at her. "You okay?" "Ask me in a week." Down at the command post, headlights cut through morning fog. Another vehicle pulled in, mud-splattered army plates. A man stepped out wearing fatigue pants and a jacket marked with the Ranger tab. Colonel Travis Bennett. He moved like someone who'd spent too many nights waiting for bad news. He found Sheriff Chambers near the command tent. "Where, Agent Grant?" "Inside," Chambers said, rubbing his eyes. "Running point." "Not for long." Grant looked up as Bennett entered. "Can I help you?" "Lieutenant Colonel Bennett. I worked with Captain Harrington overseas." Grant's brows lifted. And I'm here to tell you she's the best chance you've got. Don't touch her position." "This is a federal operation, Colonel." "And that's your first mistake." Grant set his tablet down. "She's a liability. PTSD, disciplinary discharge." "Stop." Bennett's voice dropped low. "You want the real story. The intel that failed her came from your side of the house. CIA assets tagged a compound. She questioned the file twice, but the op went ahead. When it went bad, she took the blame because it was easier than burning a whole division of suits." Grant froze. "That's not in the report." "Exactly." The room went still. The sound of rain filled the gap. Bennett leaned closer. "You want this to end without a massacre. You let her call it. She won't miss. She won't panic. She'll do the right thing even if it kills her." Grant stared at him, jaw tight. Then quietly, "She stays, but she follows orders." "She always has," Bennett said, "just not the wrong ones." Back on the ridge, time dragged. Brooks stretched, bones popping. "So that's the colonel, huh?" "Yeah," Valerie's lips twitched faintly. "Never thought I'd hear from him again." "He vouched for you." "He shouldn't have to." She looked through the scope again. Franklin Shepard was still there, slumped, motionless, soaked in guilt. She could almost hear her mother's voice through the storm. "Bring them home, all of them." She wondered what home even meant anymore. When she'd left the army, They'd given her medals in silence. When she came back to Boulder Creek, they gave her pity and distance. Now they gave her purpose again, the cruelest mercy of all. Because purpose meant risk. And risk meant losing everything you just learned to live without. Brooks's voice broke the thought. I keep thinking about that kid, Wyatt. What about him? Imagine being 19 and realizing your father's mistakes might define you forever. Valerie blinked slowly. I don't have to imagine it. The radio hissed again. Overwatch command. Franklin Shepard has requested to speak with his wife again. Possible surrender. Stay alert. Copy, Valerie said, but her breath caught. Through the scope, she watched him pick up the phone. His hands shook, his head bowed. Kate, he said, tell them I'm coming out. Her voice trembled through static. Put down the gun first. I will. Promise me. I promise. He laid the shotgun gently on the floor. Overwatch, Valerie whispered into her mic. Subject disarming. Repeat disarming. Grant's voice came back immediately tense. Hold fire. Tactical on standby. Franklin straightened, eyes wet. He looked around at the hostages, at Warner, at the mayor, at the neighbors who'd stopped visiting his diner booth months ago. I'm sorry, he said quietly, for everything. Then he walked toward the door. Rain splattered against the glass. Thunder rumbled close now, heavy as artillery fire in the distance. Valerie tracked him through the scope. Every step measured, slow, fragile. She whispered, come on, Franklin. Don't give anyone a reason. The doors opened. He stepped into the gray morning, hands raised. FBI agents swarmed, shouting. Down on the ground. He froze, eyes shut, letting the rain wash the dirt and desperation off his skin. Then he lowered himself, face against the wet pavement, surrender complete. Overwatch, this is command, Grant said, relief breaking through control. Suspect in custody, all hostages safe, stand down. Valerie didn't move. She kept watching until they hauled Franklin away, his body sagging but alive. Brooks touched her shoulder gently. It's over. Yeah. You didn't have to take the shot. I never wanted to. She rolled onto her back, letting the rain hit her face. The clouds above were the color of old wounds, gray, endless, familiar. Down below, the town began to breathe again. Inside the diner that had been half-packed with spectators, people started crying. The sheriff slumped against a cruiser. The news crews whispered about heroism. But Valerie didn't feel like a hero. She felt empty, like a chamber after the bullet's gone. By the time they hiked down from the ridge, her rebuilt knee screamed with every step. Brooks offered to carry the rifle. Valerie shook her head. You never hand off your weapon, she said, even when it's heavy. The school was chaos, flashing lights, medical tents, blankets. Sheriff Chambers found her near the truck. He looked 20 years older than yesterday. Harrington, he extended a hand. She shook it once, firm, professional. Thank you, he said. You saved lives today. No, she replied quietly. I just made sure nobody had to die for someone else's mistakes. He didn't argue. As she turned to leave, the crowd parted around her. Some stared, some whispered, some lifted phones to film the woman who'd once been their shame and was suddenly their savior. She didn't look back. She just kept walking into the thinning rain, into the silence she'd always carried, into whatever came next. Because sometimes redemption doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it just walks away before anyone can ruin it. When the shooting stops, the noise doesn't. It just changes shape. By morning, Boulder Creek wasn't a town anymore. It was a headline. Reporters swarmed like flies, cables slithering across mud, microphones stabbing through the rain. Every camera wanted the same thing, a quote, a face, a hero. And for once, the town didn't look away from Valerie Harrington. They couldn't. She'd saved their children, their teachers, their mayor. She'd done it without firing a single shot. But the eyes watching her now weren't grateful. They were curious, suspicious, hungry, because people loved redemption stories, but they loved tearing them apart even more. The next day, Valerie sat alone on the tailgate of her truck outside the sheriff's office. Her rifle case rested beside her, mud-streaked, heavy as guilt. Steam rose from the wet asphalt as the morning sun broke through low clouds. She hadn't slept. Didn't want to. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard Franklin Shepard's voice again, that quiet breaking tone when he said, "I'm tired." The sound of surrender haunted her more than gunfire ever had. "Coffee." She looked up. Deputy Brooks stood there holding 2 steaming cups. "You look like hell," Brooks said, sitting beside her. "Thanks." Valerie took one sip. "You always this honest with your commanding officers." "You're not my commanding officer." "Then you're braver than I thought." They both smiled faintly, a truce between soldiers who didn't need words to fill the silence. "How Wyatt?" Valerie asked. "In custody, cooperative, terrified, says his dad never meant to hurt anyone." "He didn't." "You sure?" Valerie's voice dropped. "You learn to see the difference between hate and pain. Franklin was just tired of being invisible." Brooks nodded. "You should talk to him." "He doesn't need me. He needs time." "So do you." "Time doesn't fix everything." "No," Brooks said softly, "but it makes the bleeding quieter." Before Valerie could answer, a black SUV rolled into the lot. FBI plates. Agent Russell Grant stepped out, sunglasses reflecting the morning glare. His suit was pressed, shoes spotless, everything about him controlled except his jaw. "Here comes trouble," Brooks muttered. Valerie didn't move. Grant stopped a few feet away. "Captain Harrington." "Agent Grant." "May I?" He gestured to the tailgate. "It's a free country," she said, though her tone made it sound debatable. He sat, adjusted his cufflinks like he was preparing to deliver a verdict. "You made the right call yesterday," he began, "tactically speaking. Glad you approve." "I'm not here to approve or condemn. I'm here to close the loop." "Close the loop," she repeated. "That what you call it when people survive?" He looked at her for a long moment. "You saved 14 hostages, prevented collateral damage. That matters. And the Bureau will officially recognize your involvement as civilian assistance. Unofficially," he hesitated, "you complicated things." She smirked. "Story of my life." "Don't mock this, Captain. The optics matter." "Optics?" Her laugh was hollow. 3,000 meters through rain and glass. "I know optics, Agent Grant. What you mean is control." Grant removed his glasses, his gaze sharper now. "You disobeyed a federal directive. You stayed on scene after being ordered to withdraw." "Because if I hadn't, those kids would be dead." "Maybe, or maybe it would have still ended clean. You'll never know." She turned to him fully. "You ever seen what a man looks like after a breach gone wrong?" He didn't answer. "I have," she continued. "Dozens of times. Blood spreads fast on gym floors. It seeps between the lines on the court, and then people like you step over it with a clipboard." Grant's voice dropped. "You think I don't know what loss looks like?" "No," she said. "I think you've mistaken paperwork for penance." They sat there, the morning heavy between them. Finally he spoke again, quieter this time. "You think I wanted this? You think I enjoy watching civilians carry my job because the system moves too slow? I read your file, Harrington. You took a shot you shouldn't have. You lived with it. I respect that." "Respect doesn't fix what it broke." "No," he said, "but maybe acknowledgement does." He stood, dusted rain from his jacket. "FBI's wrapping up by tonight. Shepard's being processed for state custody. The media will keep chewing this for weeks. My advice, leave before they decide you're the villain again. She didn't look at him, already planned on it. He paused. For what it's worth, you were right. Bureaucracy kills more people than bullets. Then maybe stop feeding it, she said. Grant's lips twitched, a ghost of a smile. Maybe. He turned and walked back toward his SUV. But before he got in, he said something that almost didn't reach her. You're not done yet, Captain. You never are. By afternoon, Valerie drove out of town. Past the diner where she used to sit alone. Past the gas station where people pretended not to recognize her. Past the church that still rang bells on Sundays, as if faith was louder than shame. The mountains opened around her like a wound healing in slow motion. Her mother's farmhouse waited at the end of the long dirt road. When she parked, Phyllis was already on the porch, blanket over her shoulders, eyes red from crying she'd never admit to. Was it bad? She asked softly. It's over, Valerie said. That's not what I asked. Valerie set the rifle case down by the door. I didn't shoot. That's good. Doesn't feel like it. Phyllis stood, walked closer. I watched the news, they called you a hero. They always do that right before they forget your name again. Her mother smiled sadly. You never did like being seen. Visibility comes with judgment, Valerie murmured. People forgive what they can understand. I'm not one of those things. Phyllis touched her daughter's face, calloused hand, trembling thumb tracing a scar near her jaw. You're human, that's enough. Valerie wanted to believe her. But belief had never been her strength. That night she couldn't sleep. She sat on the porch, listening to crickets, the soft hum of life pretending the world wasn't broken. In her lap lay an envelope, official, sealed, left at the sheriff's desk before she'd left town. FBI letterhead. She tore it open. Inside a simple note. Captain Harrington. There's a situation in Wyoming. Small town, similar setup, rural perimeter, local law enforcement overwhelmed. They ask for someone who understands patience and precision. You're not obligated, but you're being requested. Grant. She stared at it for a long time. It wasn't an order. It was an invitation. A chance to crawl back into the world she'd tried to leave. A chance to matter again, or to lose what was left of herself trying. Phyllis stepped out quietly behind her. Another call. Valerie nodded. Her mother sighed. You know, you don't have to keep proving you're not broken. It's not about proving, Valerie said. It's about purpose. Purpose without peace is just another war. Then maybe I was built for war. Phyllis shook her head gently. No, you were built to end them. They stood there in silence, wind tugging at the porch chimes. Finally, Valerie folded the letter, tucked it into her jacket. Her mother whispered, You'll go, won't you? Valerie didn't answer. She just looked out at the horizon, the same horizon that had watched her leave for Afghanistan and come home from it, and now dared her to leave again. Someone has to, she said quietly. 2 days later, the town of Boulder Creek tried to return to normal. But normal didn't come back easily. Mayor Hutchins resigned. The diner put up a closed for reflection sign. And in a holding cell at the county jail, Franklin Shepard sat with his head in his hands, whispering to the empty air. Tell her thank you, he said when the chaplain visited. Tell the sniper. She's gone, the chaplain replied. Franklin smiled faintly. Figures. Meanwhile, in the Montana morning, Valerie packed light. A duffel, a map, a weapon she'd sworn she'd never carry again. Brooks called as she was loading the truck. You going somewhere? Looks like it. You sure this is the way? No, Valerie said, but I keep ending up where I'm needed. Someday, Brooks said, you should end up where you're wanted. Valerie smiled, the kind that hides more pain than it shows. Maybe, she said and hung up. She started the engine. The radio played softly, static, and a song she didn't recognize. The road stretched out like memory, long, cracked, familiar. As she drove, her reflection ghosted in the window, the same eyes that once saw war through a scope, now searching for something quieter, maybe even forgiveness. And somewhere between the mountains and the rising sun, she whispered to no one in particular, "You can't outrun what you carry, but you can walk beside it." The wind took the words and carried them away, across the fields, across the silence, across the endless road that would always find her again. How many times can a person walk into the same kind of storm and still pretend they're only passing through? The road into Wyoming stretched like a scar across endless plains, yellow grass bending under wind that smelled of rain and memory. Valerie Harrington drove in silence, the hum of the truck engine filling the spaces her thoughts didn't dare touch. The mountains ahead were smaller than Montana, but sharper, their shadows long and cold. Every time she caught her reflection in the side mirror, she barely recognized herself, jaw set, eyes hollow, the face of someone who never fully came home. The radio buzzed with scattered news chatter. Boulder Creek was still in headlines. Female ex-ranger defuses standoff without firing shot. She turned it off. She didn't like the way her name sounded when strangers said it like a myth. At the Wyoming border, the clouds began to gather again, heavy, metallic, waiting. Her destination was a mining town called Ashridge, population barely 2,000. Remote, underfunded, the kind of place you only find when something's gone wrong. The call had come from a local sheriff named Mara Collingwood, former Marine turned law enforcement, voice sharp as gravel and twice as steady. All Valerie had been told was that there'd been a hostage situation in the abandoned refinery on the town's northern edge. 3 suspects, unknown motives, possible explosives. But that wasn't what drew her there. It was the last line of Grant's note. They asked for someone who understands patience and precision. Someone, not a name. Someone. She didn't know if that was respect or cowardice. By the time she reached Ashridge, dusk had already smothered the sun. The refinery loomed against the skyline, rusted towers, broken windows, a graveyard of steel. Red and blue lights flickered in the distance, washing the landscape in cold color. Sheriff Collingwood met her by the outer barricade. Short hair, tactical vest, scars old enough to have stories. She didn't bother with introductions. "You the sniper." Valerie stepped out of the truck, slinging her duffel over one shoulder. "Retired." Collingwood eyed her. "Not tonight, you're not." "Any word inside?" 3 hostiles, 2 adults, 1 younger, holding 4 minors from the night shift. Locals say they're part of some fringe anti-federal group. They've already made demands: trucks, cash, safe passage. Classic panic play. "Any casualties?" "Not yet." "Good." Collingwood started walking toward the mobile command tent. "FBI's on the way, but roads are washed out from last night's storm. We've got maybe 2 hours before they arrive and start quoting procedure." Valerie nodded once. "Then let's use those 2 hours." Inside the tent, a table was covered with maps, drone images, and coffee rings. Local deputies hovered near the edges, their faces drawn and exhausted. "Who's your spotter?" Collingwood asked. "I don't need one." "Everyone needs one." Valerie looked up, meeting her eyes. "Not everyone." The sheriff studied her for a moment, then grinned faintly. "You're as stubborn as they said." "I get that a lot." "Fine, you work alone, but you don't fire unless I say so." "Agreed," Valerie said, "unless I don't have a choice." Collingwood exhaled through her nose. "I'll take that as compliance for now." They shared a look, mutual respect, born of shared scars. Outside, the rain had started again, thin needles drifting sideways through wind. Valerie unpacked her rifle under a canopy near the vehicles. Different rifle this time, lighter, matte black, clean lines. She checked the bolt, adjusted the bipod, and set her bag aside. She could feel the deputies watching her, whispering. One of them, young, pale, still learning how to hide fear, finally spoke. "Ma'am, is it true you're the one from Boulder Creek?" Valerie didn't look up. "Depends on what you've heard. They said you didn't miss." "I didn't shoot." That silenced him. When she looked up, his expression wasn't judgment. It was confusion. How could someone so precise walk away without pulling the trigger? She didn't bother explaining. People believed in aim, not restraint. Minutes later, Sheriff Collingwood returned, her radio pressed to her ear. "They just called again," she said. "Leader calls himself Reese Talbot. Used to work here before the mine shut down. Claims the company stole pension money, cut safety corners, left men sick. He's demanding the CEO show up in person." Valerie frowned. "And if he does?" Collingwood's jaw tightened. "Then he says he'll make a statement on behalf of the forgotten workers." Valerie looked toward the refinery. Through rain and distance, she could see the broken windows glowing faintly from inside. "Revenge wrapped in politics," she murmured. "He's not after money, he's after meaning." "Meaning doesn't keep people alive," Collingwood said. "It's what makes them dangerous." The sheriff raised an eyebrow. "You speak from experience." Valerie didn't answer. They drove the perimeter in silence, headlights cutting through fog. The road wound uphill, ending in a ridge overlooking the refinery yard, rusted machinery and water pools reflecting dim light from the windows. "3 possible overwatch points," Valerie said, scanning the terrain. "Rooftop, North Silo, or here." "You tell me." "Here's cleaner. Distance 2,800 meters, minimal elevation drift. Wind strong. I've shot through worse." Collingwood parked behind an old storage container. "Then this is your nest." Valerie stepped out, opened her case, and began assembling the rifle with the same reverence a priest reserves for scripture. Metal clicked against metal, movement slow, practiced, silent. Collingwood watched her for a long moment before saying, "You look like you hate that thing." "I do," Valerie said. "Then why keep it?" "Because it listens better than people do." The sheriff nodded once, like she understood too well. Through the scope, Valerie saw movement. 3 heat signatures inside the main refinery office. One tall, packing Talbot. One near the hostages, nervous. One sitting by the window, weapon across his lap. "They're tired," Valerie said. "They've been there too long." "You think that helps us?" "It helps them make mistakes." A pause, then Collingwood asked quietly, "You ever get used to this?" "No." "Then why keep doing it?" Valerie hesitated. The truth came out softer than she meant it to. "Because if someone, going to stare through that glass and decide who lives, it should be someone who hates it." The sheriff looked at her like she'd just said something holy. Hours passed. Negotiations dragged. Rain thickened to a steady curtain. Talbot's voice came through the loudspeakers the sheriff had set up. Ragged, furious, the sound of a man who'd been waiting his whole life to be heard. "They took everything from us. My brother died in that mine because they wouldn't fix the ventilation. We buried him ourselves while the company sent flowers." "Reese," Collingwood's voice replied, steady through the mic, "I know you're angry, but this won't bring him back." "You think I don't know that?" he shouted. "You think I want this? I just want them to look at me for once." Valerie closed her eyes. The words hit like shrapnel from another time. "Look at me." The same thing she'd once screamed silently at her commanders, her peers, the ones who dismissed her as the token female in a ranger unit. She'd learned then that being seen didn't always mean being understood. Through the scope, she saw the younger suspect, barely 20, fumbling with his rifle, agitated. Second hostel's unstable, Valerie reported. He's packing too close to the hostages. Can you take him if he fires? Collingwood asked. Yes, but you won't until you have to. Correct. God, you're infuriating. So I've heard. The radio crackled, another voice now, the female negotiator. They're refusing food and water. Hostages are showing signs of panic. Valerie's eyes flicked back to her scope. Reese just pushed one of the miners forward. Looks like he's testing leverage. This is deteriorating. Any movement from FBI? Still an hour out, Collingwood said, cursing under her breath. They'll get here just in time to clean the mess. The wind picked up, rain slanted, thunder cracked somewhere over the mountains. Valerie steadied her breath, lined her sights with the younger man's rifle barrel. Her finger rested against the trigger guard, not pressing, just feeling the weight of possibility. Talk to me, she said quietly. Collingwood blinked. You mean me? No, him. She tapped the earpiece linked to command, voice low, calm. Reese Talbot, this is Captain Valerie Harrington. I'm not law enforcement. I'm not your enemy. Static, then, who the hell is this? Someone who knows what it's like to lose everything and think the world stopped caring. The line went quiet. Don't, Collingwood whispered. You're not cleared to. Valerie ignored her. You think this gets you justice, she said into the mic. It won't. It'll just make your brother die twice, once in that mine, and again when people remember you as the man who killed for attention. Shut up, Talbot snapped. You want them to look at you. Fine, I'm looking. So are the cameras. What do you want them to see? Static filled the air, heavy, waiting. Then faintly, I just want them to say his name. Valerie exhaled, then say it. Caleb, his voice broke. His name was Caleb. You've said it now. That's more than they ever did. Don't ruin it. Another pause. Then she saw movement, the gun lowering. Reese, Collingwood said softly through the open line, picking up where Valerie left off. We can work this out. Let the hostages go. Walk out alive. Make them hear his name the right way. Minutes stretched. Then one by one, the hostages stumbled out into the rain, coughing, shaking, alive. Overwatch report, the sheriff asked. Hostages clear, Valerie said. 2 suspects surrendering, 3rd can't confirm. Through her scope, she saw the youngest, the unstable one, still inside, packing, weapon trembling in his hands. Sheriff, she said sharply, one still armed, he's. The gun flashed. A burst of light and sound. One hostage hit in the shoulder, spinning to the ground before he could reach the exit. Gunfire, someone shouted. Do I have authorization? Valerie barked. Collingwood froze. Take it. Valerie's body reacted before her heart could. Wind, breath, trigger. The rifle kicked once, a sharp, clean motion. Silence followed. Inside the refinery, the young gunman fell backward, weapon tumbling from his grip. Target neutralized, Valerie whispered. She lowered her head to the ground, eyes closed. Her voice cracked when she said the words that never felt like victory. Hostage alive. Later, as they loaded the wounded into ambulances, Sheriff Collingwood found her standing in the rain, rifle slung low. You saved them, the sheriff said quietly. Valerie shook her head. I ended someone else. He made that choice. So did I. They stood in silence, rain softened to mist. Collingwood finally said, For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Valerie looked out at the refinery, smoke curling from the broken window where the bullet had ended its arc. There's no right thing, she said. Just the thing that lets you sleep for a few hours before it finds you again. The sheriff nodded slowly. You ever sleep easy? Once. When? Before I learned how far 3,000 meters really is. What happens when the world calls you a hero for something that still makes you sick to your stomach? 3 days after Ashridge, the wind still smelled like gunpowder. Valerie sat alone in a sterile conference room at the regional field office, the kind of place where tragedies were reduced to bullet points on PowerPoint slides. The walls were too white, the coffee too bitter, the silence too official. Across from her, Agent Russell Grant read from a folder, her name printed in red on the tab. He didn't look up when he spoke. "Captain Harrington, this review is for record purposes only. You are not under investigation. You understand that?" She didn't answer. He glanced up. "Captain." "Funny," she murmured. "I don't remember re-enlisting." Grant closed the folder. "This isn't punishment. We're trying to debrief the event. Standard procedure after civilian-involved tactical outcomes." Standard procedure doesn't usually involve FBI suits in conference rooms, pretending they know what 2,800 meters feels like. His jaw tightened. "You neutralized an active threat, saved hostages, and minimized casualties. We just need to document your decision process." "Decision process," she laughed under her breath. "You make it sound like math." "It is in a way." "No," she said quietly. "It's physics. Flesh, bone, distance, and wind. You pull that trigger, you're the equation and the answer." He studied her for a long time, like a man trying to read a language he'd only ever heard translated. Finally, he said, "You could have walked away from that call." "I tried. And the road didn't let me." Grant leaned back. "You talk like you're haunted." She gave him a tired smile. "You talk like you're not." The silence that followed wasn't comfortable, but it was honest. When the debrief ended, she signed the paperwork with a trembling hand. The pen felt heavier than any weapon she'd ever held. At the door, Grant said, "You did the right thing, Harrington." "Then why doesn't it feel like it?" "Because right and easy rarely live in the same room." She looked at him then, really looked, and for a second saw something human behind his careful detachment. He was tired too, just in a different way. "Go home," he said quietly, "before someone else finds another crisis to hand you." She almost laughed. "Home? Tell me where that is, Agent." He didn't answer. By nightfall, Valerie was back in Montana. The farmhouse lights glowed like a memory at the edge of the trees. Her mother, Phyllis, met her at the porch, wrapped her in silence first, then arms. No questions, just warmth. Valerie stayed still for a long time before she whispered, "It happened again." Phyllis didn't ask for details. "Did you save them?" "Yes." "Then that's enough." "No, Mom, it's never enough. Because every time I pull the trigger, I think it's the last, and somehow the world keeps finding new reasons." Her mother stepped back, studying her daughter's face, the cracks behind her composure. "Val," she said softly, "you're still trying to pay for something you already served your time for. Not everything earns parole. Then stop trying to buy peace like it's a thing you can afford." Valerie turned away, unable to stand under that kind of love. Inside, the walls still smelled faintly of cedar and old coffee. Her medals hung in a drawer she never opened. The rifle case leaned against the wall like an accusation. She poured whiskey into a chipped glass, didn't drink, just watched it. Amber light catching in the rim like trapped sunlight. That's when the knock came. 3 short taps, military rhythm. She froze. Another knock. Then a familiar voice through the door. "Permission to enter, Captain." Her heart caught. She hadn't heard that voice since Kabul. She opened the door. Colonel Travis Bennett stood there, older, grayer, but unmistakably himself. His eyes, sharp and tired, carried the kind of authority that couldn't be faked. "Colonel," she said, voice a whisper. "Val," he removed his cap, stepped inside. "Didn't think I'd find you here. Grant said you'd disappear again." "Grant's an optimist." Bennett looked around the small living room, the silence, the ghosts. You keeping well. Define well. He nodded. That's what I thought. They sat. He didn't waste time. I read the reports. Boulder Creek, Ashridge. You handled yourself like the ranger you've always been. She smirked faintly. Funny, I thought the army stopped calling me that. Paperwork can't erase legacy. Legacy gets people killed. He studied her, still carrying Kabul. Every day. He leaned forward, then stopped carrying it alone. She stiffened. You weren't there. I was in the next sector, he said quietly. I heard the call, knew the target. I know what command did. They needed a fall person and you were convenient. Doesn't change what I did. No, he said, but it changes what it meant. She stared at him, trying to find anger, but finding something worse, understanding. He continued, you think that boy you shot would have lived if you hadn't fired. Maybe, maybe not, but you saved 10 others. You carried the guilt so the rest of us didn't have to. Valerie looked down, jaw trembling. I don't want to be anyone's justification. Then stop being their martyr. The words cut through her like shrapnel. She stood, walked to the window. The wind outside carried the smell of pine and rain, the same air she'd breathed before deployments, before death turned into routine. You came all this way to give me a lecture, she said. I came to give you a choice. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, unmarked, sealed. What is it? An unofficial mission request. Quiet, off-grid, Eastern Europe. There's an NGO convoy being targeted, American medical personnel. No air cover, they need overwatch. She didn't touch the envelope. You're serious? I'm giving you the option to do something that matters before the politicians turn you into a cautionary tale. I'm done, Colonel. He looked at her unflinching. You've been done since the day I met you. You just keep finding new ways to prove it. Silence filled the room again. Finally she whispered, why me? Because they'll listen to you. You've got a reputation now, mythic, dangerous, necessary. The kind that scares people into doing the right thing. She stared at the envelope. Her pulse slowed, her breath deepened. Another mission, another chance to redeem a sin that no longer had a name. Bennett stood. You don't have to decide tonight. I already have, she said. He smiled sadly. You always do. At the door he paused. For what it's worth, Val, the ones who come home broken are usually the ones who cared the most. She didn't reply, she couldn't. When he was gone, she sat for a long time, the envelope untouched between her hands. Outside, the rain started again, slow, relentless, forgiving nothing. That night she dreamed of Kabul again. The ridge, the heat, the distant echo of mortar fire. She was lying prone, crosshairs steady on a compound, a target silhouette in the window. Command's voice in her ear, confirmed hostile, take the shot. She fired. The world went still. Then movement, small, fast. A child running into frame, screaming, clutching the fallen body. She tried to move, to shout, to stop time, but war didn't stop for regret. When she woke, she was crying, something she hadn't done in years. The sound startled her. It felt too human. By morning she was dressed, packed, moving. Philly stood by the porch, arms folded. Where are you going this time? East, Valerie said. Her mother didn't try to stop her. She just stepped closer, pressed something into her hand, a small silver cross. You don't have to believe, she said softly. Just remember there's something bigger than guilt. Valerie nodded, maybe. Then she got into the truck, started the engine and drove. The envelope lay on the passenger seat, its contents unknown but inevitable. For miles she didn't open it. She just followed the road through pine valleys, across rivers, under skies that couldn't decide between storm and light. At a gas station near the state line, she finally tore the seal. Inside, coordinates, a single phrase typed beneath. Watch the ridge. Not everyone who carries a rifle is your enemy. She read it twice, then folded it back up, tucked it into her jacket, and whispered to the wind. Then maybe I'll finally learn the difference. That night, as she crossed into Colorado, she turned off the headlights and stopped by the roadside. The stars were out sharp, bright, impossibly far. She stepped out, looked up, and breathed. It had been years since she'd let herself look at the sky without scanning for threats. It was strange, this kind of quiet, almost violent in its peace. She thought of Franklin Shepard, of Wyatt, of Reese Talbot, of the child in Kabul. And she thought of herself still standing, still waiting for permission to stop. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of rain and cedar, the same as home. And for the first time in years, Valerie smiled, just barely. Because maybe redemption didn't come from missions or medals. Maybe it came from the moment you realized the world didn't owe you peace. You had to make it for yourself. What if the enemy wasn't aiming at you, but for you? The cargo plane dropped out of gray cloud cover like a ghost. Below, the Carpathian foothills rolled into endless green, scarred with burnt villages and broken fences. War didn't live here officially, it just refused to die. Valerie sat strapped into a jump seat beside crates of medical kits. The air smelled of diesel, metal, and fear disguised as logistics. Across from her, two NGO medics dozed under blankets, headphones in, unaware they were flying into a place where treaties meant less than weather forecasts. The pilot's voice came through her headset. 10 miles to drop. Convoy waiting at border checkpoint. Your contact will be a man named Luca Stoyan. Copy, she said. The pilot added, locals call this valley the mirror. Said it's where soldiers go to meet the version of themselves they tried to forget. She almost smiled. Guess I'm right on schedule. When the plane touched down on a dirt strip, the rain had already started, thin needles cutting through smoke from distant fires. Luca Stoyan was waiting. Late 30s, beard like mountain brush, flak jacket with half the plates missing. You're the American, he asked in accented English. Something like that. They said you don't miss. They say too much. He laughed, clapped her shoulder, then led her toward a convoy of 3 trucks painted white with fading red crosses. Each carried crates of antibiotics, food, and a handful of terrified idealists. Road ahead, mined in places, Luca said, but locals mark them with red stones, unless rain moves them. Comforting. 2 kilometers north, insurgent scouts watch the ridge. They shoot to scare mostly, sometimes not. Any friendlies in the hills? Not lately. Valerie loaded her pack, slung the rifle. Then I'll watch from there. Luca frowned, alone. She met his eyes. That's how I do my thinking. She reached the ridge by dusk. The valley spread below like a painting torn at the edges, trucks inching along a mud road, villagers scattering at the sound of engines. Wind rolled through the grass, whispering in a language older than nations. Valerie unfolded her bipod, sighted the path. Through the scope, the convoy looked small, fragile, human. Then movement. A flash, sunlight glinting off glass. Counter-sniper, she whispered. She dialed the rangefinder. 3,120 meters, high ground opposite, the shimmer of a scope cutting through fog. She didn't fire. Didn't breathe. Just watched. The angle, the positioning. Whoever was there wasn't aiming for the convoy. They were watching her. Radio crackled in her ear. Luca's voice. Convoy clear so far, you see anything? Maybe, she said. Tell your drivers to keep moving, don't stop for anything. She adjusted again, saw a silhouette now. Small frame, lean build, long hair tied back under a hood. A woman. The other sniper shifted, glass catching sun again, then disappeared behind stone. Valerie felt her pulse settle into the old rhythm. 4 beats inhale, 6 beats exhale. Focus, measure, wait. She's good, Valerie thought. Too good to be local militia. A flicker of motion, not hostile, almost hesitant. A gloved hand rose above the rock, palm open, fingers spread. A signal, not of surrender, of recognition. Valerie blinked. "What are you doing?" she murmured to herself. Then the radio hissed again, not Luca this time. A voice she didn't recognize, faint, female, bleeding through static. "You shouldn't be here, Captain." Her throat tightened. "How do you know my name?" Silence, then the voice again, closer now, clearer. "Because you trained me." The world tilted. Memory surged. Fort Benning, 2016, the sniper school rotation she'd guest instructed. A handful of foreign officers in joint exchange. One of them sharp, quiet, Ukrainian name, Nadia Volkova. A prodigy with a rifle, eyes that saw everything and gave nothing back. Valerie exhaled. "Nadia." "You taught me patience," the voice said softly, "and restraint. Now I'm teaching you consequence." "Why are you on that ridge?" "Because someone paid me to make sure your convoy does cross." "Mercenary work." "Mercy work," Nadia corrected. "These supplies go to both sides. They feed soldiers who burn our villages. I can't let that happen." Valerie closed her eyes. "You don't have to do this. You didn't have to take that shot in Kabul." The words hit like recoil. "How do you know about that?" "Everyone in the Valley of Silence knows your name. The woman who killed a father to save a child. You're a legend here." "I'm not proud of that legend." "Neither am I." Through the scope, Valerie saw her now, half silhouette, half shadow. Their eyes met across 3,000 meters of rain and ruin. Two ghosts staring through glass at the parts of themselves they couldn't forgive. Luca's voice broke through again. "Harrington, talk to me. We're halfway down the pass." She whispered, "Keep moving, and tell your people not to look up." "Why?" "Because someone's watching me, not you." He hesitated. "You sure?" "Positive." She switched back to the open channel. "Nadia, you fire, and this turns into something neither of us walks away from. Maybe that's the point. You really want to die on this ridge." "I already did once. The day they left us to burn while your country wrote ceasefires." Valerie's breath caught. She had no defense for that. Because Nadia wasn't wrong. "I'm not your enemy," she said. "Then prove it, leave." "I can't, those medics are pawns. They're people. So was my brother." The radio clicked off. Rain intensified, drumming on stone. Thunder rolled down the valley like tanks. Valerie adjusted her sights again, every muscle whispering that she might have seconds before the shot came. Through the scope, she saw Nadia's muzzle barely visible above the rock. Perfect position, perfect angle. She's giving me a choice, Valerie thought. Move and live, stay and fight. She stayed. Minutes passed. Neither fired, each waiting for the other to blink first. Then another sound, distant explosion near the convoy, a mine triggered by rain. Valerie flinched, looked away for a heartbeat, and the world erupted. The shot came from Nadia's ridge, not toward her, toward the convoy. One truck veered, slammed into a ditch. "Luca," Valerie shouted, "report." Static, then, "Minor hit, tire gone, we're fine." Valerie spun the scope back. Nadia was gone. She tore down the rifle, packed fast, and started downhill, mud slipping under boots, breath ragged. Rain blurred everything. Halfway down she found tracks, light, precise, leading toward the forest. She followed. The world narrowed to footfalls, breathing, and ghosts. When she finally caught sight of movement ahead, Nadia was kneeling by a fallen tree, adjusting her rifle sling. Valerie raised her voice just enough to carry. "Nadia, don't." The young sniper froze, then turned slow, rain clinging to her hair. "You'd really shoot me?" she asked. "No. Then you'll die here." Valerie stepped closer, unarmed now, rifle slung on her back. "I didn't come to fight you." Nadia's eyes flicked down to Valerie's empty hands, then back up uncertain. "Then why come?" "To stop you from becoming me." For a second, Nadia's expression cracked, something almost like grief slipping through. "You think I want this," she whispered. "I wanted a uniform, a flag, instead I got graves." "Then walk away." "I can't, they'll find me." "They always do," Valerie said, "but running doesn't mean surrender." Nadia's hands trembled. Her rifle lowered. The storm broke overhead, thunder crashing close enough to shake the ground. "Tell me," Nadia said, "do you still see their faces?" "Every night." "Then maybe we're the same." Valerie shook her head. "No, because you still have a choice." Lightning flashed for an instant, their reflections merged in the puddled earth. Teacher and student, sinner and mirror. Then a voice over Valerie's radio. "Harrington, drone shows movement, hostile patrol headed your way from east, 10 men armed." Nadia heard it too. Her face changed panic, then resolve. "Go," Valerie said, "I'll hold them." Nadia's eyes widened. "You cover me." "Someone once did for me." She gestured toward the trees. "South Ridge, 2 clicks, you'll find a stream, follow it." Nadia hesitated. "You'll die." "Not today." They stared at each other for a heartbeat too long. Then Nadia nodded once, slung her rifle, and vanished into the rain. Valerie turned toward the ridge, set up her scope, waited. Shapes moved through fog, armed men fanning out. She exhaled steady, the first clean breath since Kabul. 20 minutes later, the patrol was gone, scattered, disarmed, retreating into forest confusion after 2 warning shots snapped past their boots. Valerie stayed prone until silence returned. Then she lowered the rifle and whispered, "Run, Nadia, don't look back." By dawn, the convoy crossed the border safely. Luca met her by the last checkpoint, eyes wide. "We heard gunfire in the hills. You all right?" "I'm fine." "What happened up there?" She looked toward the ridge, mist curling where smoke had been. "Nothing," she said, "just ghosts talking." Luca frowned but didn't press. "The medics wanted to thank you." "They shouldn't." He shrugged. "They will anyway." Valerie gave a tired smile. "Then tell them thank you back." That night, in a tent pitched under ruined sky, she cleaned her rifle for the last time. The motions were muscle memory, swipe, oil, reassemble, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She wondered if Nadia made it out. She wondered if saving someone like that counted as redemption or relapse. The fire outside crackled. Luca handed her a tin cup of bitter tea. "Tomorrow you fly home." "Maybe." He studied her. "You look lighter." She nodded. "Because for once I didn't take the shot." He smiled. "Then maybe that's how you win wars now." She looked into the fire. "I don't win them," she said. "I just stop them from taking anyone else." Wind pushed at the tent flap, carrying with it the smell of rain and freedom. Valerie closed her eyes, let it wash over her, and thought of a young woman disappearing into the forest, a mirror version of herself finally walking away. What if peace wasn't something you found, but something you chose to stop running from? The C-130 touched down in Billings before dawn, its engines whining against the cold. Valerie stepped out into a breath of frost and silence. No cameras this time, no convoy. Just a woman and a duffel full of ghosts. Her body ached in places that had stopped healing years ago. But it wasn't pain that slowed her. It was the weight of knowing she'd survived again when others shouldn't have had to. At the customs gate, the officer looked up from her passport. "Welcome home, Captain Harrington." Valerie forced a polite nod. The word home still felt like a foreign tongue. The road north was empty. Pines bent beneath fresh snow, the world muffled, almost merciful. She kept the radio off. She had enough voices telling her what she was supposed to be. By the time she reached Boulder Creek, morning light had just started to crawl over the mountains. The town looked smaller, quieter, as if it too had finally grown tired of its own drama. Her mother's house waited the way old houses do, unchanged but aware of time. Phyllis met her at the porch, wrapped in a wool shawl, breath visible in the chill. "You came back," she said softly. "Didn't plan to stay gone." Her mother studied her face, the lines sharper, eyes calmer, the faint tremor in her right hand. "You look emptied out." "Maybe that's what full feels like after a while." Phyllis smiled sadly. "There's stew on the stove, you still take too much salt." "Always." They walked inside. The smell of thyme and wood smoke wrapped around them like forgiveness. They ate in near silence. Finally Phyllis said, "The sheriff stopped by last week, said the bureau wants to debrief you one more time." Valerie sighed. "Grant." "He didn't say." "He never has to. He always shows up eventually." As if conjured by the thought, a black sedan appeared outside an hour later, tires crunching on the gravel drive. Phyllis looked toward the window. "You want me to stay?" "No," Valerie said. "You've done enough rescuing for one lifetime." Her mother kissed her cheek anyway. "Just remember, dignity doesn't shout, it acts." "I learned from the best," Valerie murmured. Agent Grant stepped out of the car, suit pressed, tie crooked from travel. He paused at the bottom of the porch, like he wasn't sure if he was welcome. "You always find me," she said. "It's a professional flaw." He climbed the steps, held out a folder. "Officially this is a debrief. Unofficially," he exhaled, "it's a thank you." She took the folder, didn't open it. "For what?" "For doing what none of us could." "I didn't do it for you." "I know, that's why it worked." He sat on the rail, hands clasped. "Word from the embassy is the convoy made it through. Everyone alive. You even saved one of the shooters, the girl." Valerie's eyes flickered. She saved herself. "She's safe for now," went underground, sent a message through a contact. He pulled a folded note from his pocket, "Said to give you this." Valerie hesitated before taking it. The handwriting was small, deliberate. "Thank you for letting me choose another life. I'll make it mean something." "Nadia." She stared at the words until they blurred. Grant said quietly, "You gave her a future." "She gave me a mirror." He nodded once, understanding more than he said. "Then what will you do now?" "Nothing," she said, "for once." He smiled faintly. "Nothing's underrated." They sat in silence, watching snow drift off the eaves. Finally he stood. "The bureau's closing your file. You're free to disappear again." "Already working on it." He looked down at her. "You ever wonder why I keep showing up?" She met his gaze. "Because you wish you taken the shot when it mattered." Grant almost laughed. "Maybe. Or maybe because every time you walk into hell, you make the rest of us remember we're supposed to care." He extended a hand. She shook it firm, steady. As he turned to go, she said, "Grant." He stopped. "You ever get tired of pretending this country doesn't break its own heroes?" He looked at her for a long time, every day. Then he left. That night the power flickered out in the storm. Valerie lit a candle, sat by the window, and opened the folder he'd left. Inside were two documents. The first, her official clearance, closing all prior cases. The second, a recommendation letter addressed, "To whom it may concern." She read it once, twice, then laughed softly. At the bottom, Grant had written in pen, "For future missions of mercy, contact Captain Valerie Harrington. Sometimes the world needs its ghosts." She folded the letter carefully, set it beside the candle, and stared at the flame until her eyes stung. Sometime after midnight, she stepped outside. Snow fell in thick, silent sheets. The world glowed blue under the moon, a landscape so still it felt like prayer. She walked to the fence she'd repaired months ago, the same one from the story's beginning. Half the posts had leaned in the winter wind. She touched one, smiled. "You still standing," she whispered, "even when no one's watching." She stayed there a long time, breathing the cold, feeling her pulse slow to match the rhythm of falling snow. And for the first time since Kabul, the silence didn't accuse her. It forgave her. Morning came like a confession. Valerie brewed coffee, sat at the kitchen table, notebook open. The pages were blank, and that was the point. She wrote a single line at the top. "Things worth remembering." Under it she added slowly, "Franklin Shepard for surrendering. Wyatt for walking away. Reese Talbot for speaking his brother's name. Nadia Volkova for choosing life." Then she stopped. The pen hovered. Finally she added one more. "Valerie Harrington for staying." She closed the notebook, poured another cup of coffee, and watched sunlight break through clouds. Later that week, she drove out to Boulder Creek High School. The bullet-scarred window from that terrible day had been replaced with a pane etched with names. Every hostage who'd lived, every rescuer who'd stood outside in the rain. She traced a finger over the glass. Someone had left a single white feather taped to the corner. Brooks' doing, maybe. Or fate. Valerie smiled barely. The kind of smile that doesn't reach the mouth, only the eyes. As she turned to leave, a student walking by stopped. "Ma'am," he said, "are you the sniper?" She hesitated. "No." He grinned shyly. "My dad says you saved his life." She looked at the boy, the age of the one from Kabul, and felt something unclench inside her. "Then I guess he saved mine," she said. He didn't understand, but that was okay. Some truths weren't meant to be explained, only lived. Back home, Phyllis was tending the garden despite the snowmelt. "Thought you might plant something this spring," she called. "Maybe," Valerie said, "something that grows slow." "Patience suits you." "I'm learning." Phyllis wiped her hands on her apron, looked up. "You look different." "I feel unfinished," Valerie said, "but in a good way." Her mother smiled. "That's called living." That evening, Valerie packed the rifle into its case one last time, not out of shame, but gratitude. She wrote a note and placed it inside before closing the latches. Not every trigger needs pulling. Then she carried it to the sheriff's office, left it on the counter with no explanation, and walked away. At sunset, she drove out to the ridge above town, the same ridge from the beginning, where she'd once aimed to end lives and now came only to watch them continue. Wind brushed her face. The valley below shimmered in gold and green. She could see the school, the river, the faint line of the highway that kept carrying her back no matter how far she'd gone. She whispered almost to the horizon, "I forgive you." Maybe she was speaking to Kabul. Maybe to the ghosts. Maybe to herself. It didn't matter, the air carried it anyway. As the sun dipped below the mountains, she turned to leave, boots crunching softly against the gravel path. From behind her, the wind shifted again, and for an instant it sounded like a whisper. Enemies at 3,000 meters. She smiled without turning back. Because she finally understood. The real enemy had never been distance, or insurgents or orders. It had been silence. The kind that turns guilt into gravity and keeps you from lifting your head. Now she'd broken it. She drove home under a sky clear enough to see every star. No radio, no noise. Just the hum of the engine and the quiet rhythm of her breath. At the gate she parked, stepped out, and looked once more toward the mountains. And the voiceover, if there had been one, would have said, "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts." then fade to black.